This is the Sixth Man Show, an Orlando Magic podcast, with your hosts, Luke Sylvia and Jonathan Osborne, covering all things Magic basketball. By fans, for fans. Go Magic!
What's going on, Orlando Magic fans? You guys are back with the Sixth Man Show. Today is September 28th, 2023. Jonathan Osborne here, as always, joined by my co-host, Luke Sylvia. Luke, what is going on, brother?
You know, we're doing better than some fan bases right now. Who, I'm not saying any names, but
The Miami Heat, baby.
They stumbled across the NBA Finals last year. That's not happening again anytime soon. And then they convinced themselves, Jonathan, that they're landing this big star. It's always a dangerous game to convince yourself, regardless of reports and what the player wants to do. They didn't owe him to send him to Miami if it didn't make sense. And they talked themselves into it. And then now look at them. Shambles completely. It's incredible. I've been having a great day.
The news broke, like, what was that? Like around 3 o'clock today on Wednesday, like roughly. I might be off by a little bit. It's just been such a blur since then. And I'm not usually a fan of like haters, like people that hate on things like just to hate on them. But something about the Miami Heat, I just find it just to be an irresistible thing to hate on this franchise. And the way the amount of arrogance that organization has had, like from the top down over the course of the past couple of years. You know, they trade for Jimmy Butler. They make the finals in the bubble in 2020. And that fluky run has made them believe that Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo as their best players is enough to lead them to an NBA championship. And we've seen them now, you know, make it to, you know, the Eastern, you know, Conference Finals last year, make it to the finals this year, which again, they did so by literally being one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the entire league over the course of an 82-game regular season in 6 months. And then all of a sudden became the best three-point shooting team in the league for about a month and a half. That got them into a finals matchup with the Denver Nuggets, in which they proceeded to get absolutely smoked. And again, just them, I've been tweeting this like for the last, you know, year or so. Like as long as the Heat want to keep believing that they can win a title with Jimmy Butler as their best player and with Bam Adebayo and these older veterans like Kevin Love and Kyle Lowry and just sort of piecing everything else together and talking themselves into just having a crappy regular season and then having this miraculous, you know, run in the postseason, like, please keep doing that, because I will guarantee that it will not end up in them winning a title. And then for this entire offseason to go by, they lose Max Strus, they lose Gabe Vincent, guys that they absolutely would not have gotten anywhere near the finals without, and they're just sitting back like, it's all good. And they're fans too, by the way. They're fans, they're writers, like people in the media that cover that team, they're like, oh, don't worry about it. We're sitting back, sitting pretty. We're going to end up with Damian Lillard for almost nothing because he was trying to hold the team that he's played for forever, the Portland Trailblazers, literally holding them hostage, saying, I will not play for any other franchise other than the Miami Heat. And the Miami Heat were not able to put together a better offer than like Tyler Hero, Nikola Jovic. I know they were trying to hold other guys out of the deal, like Duncan Robinson, maybe some picks, and thinking that was going to be enough just because, hey, the guy only wants to play here, so we don't have to give you, you know, the very best offer that we can. And in the end, Milwaukee sneaks in at the last freaking moment. Miami gets absolutely smoked. And now what do they have this offseason to show for it? Like they added like Thomas Bryant. I know they're really high on some of these young guys. Nikola Jovic looks like he's going to be really good. They're high on, you know, Orlando Robinson, Jaime Jaquez, I think that's how you pronounce his name. I know there's other guys that they're high on, but like, I cannot think of a team that had such high expectations, because the moment Dame requests the trade of Miami, like Miami is one of the favorites in the East all of a sudden. And to go from that to like Well, now what do? Are they going to scramble and try to trade for Jrue Holliday? Who knows? But just the way that the entire organization has been acting for years, the way that their fan base acted this entire last 3 months, this whole process, to see them just get absolutely smoked and humiliated was just made my entire day. It was absolutely fantastic.
You had a lot of fun today. You had a lot of fun. The
I
Twitter
did.
fingers
I really
were
did.
going. You recorded a video as well, put it on Twitter. You were having the time of your life. I really appreciated it. There's nothing better than a Jonathan Osborne just display of trolling and
pettiness,
and laughing, pettiness when it comes to the Miami Heat. It's one of my favorite pastimes to watch, truly.
I really appreciate that. And, there's going to be people who are like, I can't believe we're spending the first few minutes of this podcast now, the first 5-6 minutes or so, talking about the Miami Heat. But the reason that it's so significant is because it directly impacts the Orlando Magic. We're going to talk about, this is going to be the last episode that we record until Media Day. So we're not going to have an episode come out on Monday. We're going to record an episode Monday, and maybe we'll try to get that up Monday night, but early Tuesday,
right,
midnight, 1 a.m. on Tuesday at the absolute latest, where, we'll start to talk about Media Day and all that kind of stuff. But this is going to be our last episode before that. So this is sort of going to be our season preview before we get into preseason kind of content and everything like that. We'll go through who's going to be at the top of the East. We'll go through, hey, where do we realistically seeing the Magic end up in this Eastern Conference? And Damian Lillard not going to the Heat. The Southeastern Division is now wide open. I'm going to rattle off a few bets that I've made in the recent months here, and I'm feeling really good about all of them. I'll do one more victory lap. The $20 that I turned into $500 with Germany winning the World Cup. But back on July 17th, I put $20 on the Magic to win the Southeast Division at plus 1,000. I don't know if you can even get those odds right now until the trades have all been finalized. But I'm feeling really good about that bet now. When we look at our division, you look at Charlotte, Washington, Miami, Atlanta. The Magic are going to have a real chance to win the Southeast Division. Over 35.5 wins. That was a lock the moment that I made that bet. I put $200 on that to win 150. And then $40 to win $1,400 on the Magic winning Group East C in the in-season tournament. They don't even have to win the entire tournament. They just have to basically beat Toronto, Brooklyn, Chicago, and Boston. They do that. Anything can happen, obviously. We'll talk about Boston and how good they're going to be. But, this is a big deal for the Magic. And, the playoff odds.
I looked up, so per Bovada, there have been made available again the odds for the Southeast Division.
Beautiful.
The Heat are minus 185 to win the division. The Hawks are plus 215, which I don't really get. We'll get into that later. I know what it looks like on paper as far as the Magic versus the Hawks, but I'll get into why I don't necessarily agree. Orlando plus 900. Charlotte
Still?
plus 4,000.
Folks,
Charlotte plus
that
4,000.
is good value.
And the Wizards plus 20,000. So yeah, the Magic, the best odds you can get for them, or the most favorable odds, is finishing third. You can also do their exact position. So if you want to do plus 900 on the Magic getting first, you can. But if you want to do plus 340 on the Magic getting second, third plus 145, fourth plus 270, fifth, they don't even think it's really going to happen at all, plus 180.50.
I legitimately thought you were going to say plus 500 for the Magic to win the division now. Plus 900, that's crazy to me.
Yeah, it is. And
this is the same. These are the same odds makers that have the Magic at 35.5 wins. So we really shouldn't be that surprised. But look, if you've got some extra cheddar laying around, the Magic at plus 900 to win the Southeast Division right now, it's looking pretty juicy. I probably would have put more money on plus 900 than I did on plus 1,000.
Yeah. As far as the Damian Lillard trade, and like you said, it directly correlates with the Magic in terms of where Dame goes, all those sort of things. Huge, obviously, that in this instance he doesn't go to Miami, because I truthfully think we're going to be jockeying for position in the East with Miami this year. Some people might think just because they made the finals, but the way they failed to realize is that Miami ended up 7th essentially to end the season at 44 wins last year. They were definitely a dark horse, not expected to make the finals because they couldn't shoot the ball from beyond the arc. And like you said, they just happened to put lightning in a bottle and put it together. And do what Miami does with lower talent. Let's be honest. They have I saw someone say something like, I don't really care they didn't get Dame because they're just going to go to Publix and get a cashier and he's going to put up 15 points a game in the NBA this year. But as funny as it is slightly true. But regular season wise, they can't really hide. Way too much sample size, 82 games. You got to show up. And that's, I think last year regular season, that's more who the Miami Heat are. So I think the Magic are going to be jockeying for position with them most of the season, if not ahead of them as well for most of the season, in my opinion. So we will see how it shakes out. But yeah, the Damian Lillard stuff directly correlating. I love that he goes to a team that was already going to be at the top of the East. That's the biggest thing. That's a no-brainer that you should be happy about.
Doesn't change anything for us.
Doesn't change a single thing because I don't plan on the Magic being number 1 or number 2 in the East. Maybe in a couple years. But as of now, Damian, who just turned 33 in July, you maybe think he's got 3 good seasons left in him. 2 excellent seasons, and then maybe we see a little bit of a drop-off from Damian. But the timeline all works out perfectly. The Magic are coming up slowly, while the Bucks hopefully will be declining a little bit, and all the other contenders in the East as well.
And we're talking about a guy who, and I know, in recent years, Portland's, incentive to compete later on in seasons has sort of waned, but like Dame has not played more than 70 games in 3 years, 67 in 2021. I think it was like the abdomen injury that he was dealing with a lot in the 2021-2022 season. Played 29 games, and then last year played 58 games. The tank had a lot to do with that. But it'll be interesting just to see sort of how he holds up. Now, basically like their core of Giannis, Dame, Chris Middleton, and Brook Lopez, incredibly talented. He won't have to carry nearly as much of a load as he ever has, so that should help him. But when we're talking about Miami, we're talking about a team that, like, on paper got worse, in losing 2 of their starters, Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, guys who were such big parts of what they did, especially offensively. And they were a bad offensive team last year, but they won 44 games. Like, you and I have talked a lot, and when you talk to Magic fans, most people think it's incredibly realistic for the Magic to be somewhere between, 40 and 43 wins. So if the Heat come down to earth and they're right around 40 and the Magic are right around 40, you're right. The Magic are going to be jockeying with the Miami Heat, with a lot of these other teams. I think there's a potential for things to get pretty crazy, towards the end of the season. I mean, we'll talk about this a bit more in a little bit here, but when I look at Brooklyn, Atlanta, Miami, Chicago, Toronto, Indiana, and Orlando, those are all teams that are going to be really close, like that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think it's really going to go back and forth for a lot of the season with those teams. But ultimately, I'm just glad that the Heat didn't get Damian Lillard, because you add Damian Lillard to a team with Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, you're talking about a real title contender at that point. And now we're not looking at that. That's not going to be the case for Miami. It would have made it obviously tougher for the Magic to, get wins, them being in the division, having to play them 4 times, and making our road to the playoffs a little bit tougher. But just especially their smug fans and the media that covers that team, that for the last few months have just acted like they were owed Damian Lillard and that they were going to end up with him anyway, even though they had a crappy offer, because guess what? That's where he wants to play, and there's not a damn thing anybody can do about it. Well, guess what? The Milwaukee Bucks had something to say about that, and I'm not going to go full Dave Chappelle here because I am a God-loving man, but screw them. That's why. Cannot stand them. And I hope we smack them all 4 times this year. I hope we smack them in their own building. I do not find anything funnier than what happened today to the Miami Heat.
And Damian Lillard initially wants to go play in Miami, and who knows behind closed doors what really the conversations were like. Maybe he was saying like Miami feels like most realistic. Who knows? But then they said, good news. You can go play with Giannis. And you can go win a title there. And you can go all the way out to the East, and we don't have to deal with you in the West. And Damian said, hey, how you doing? That sounds great. I would love to do that. And he goes to play with Giannis. He's going to be just fine. I don't feel bad at all. I do, as everybody else, been wanting this for Dame to get out of Portland. He's deserved it. I wish it happened sooner. But, and as I'm sure in retrospect, he probably wishes that too, seeing how this has unfolded in the rap song, which was hilarious that he put out like hours after, right? Obviously, this has already been produced in the works. He knew he was not going to be there. He has this kind of waiting on deck. He puts it out. And one of the things was like, basically, his points were, I left this place better than what I inherited when I got here. And
Fair.
he essentially said, this was their decision to go a different direction, not mine. And he said something about like, you'll never replace me. Obviously talking about the guys they've brought in recent years with Scoot, Shaden Sharp, those guys, Anthony Simons, all these guys they brought in while he was there. You're not going to replace me. And he might be right, but we will see. But it was a good move for both parties involved. I am very much on board with both ways that they went there. Blazers needed it. They needed to get younger. It was time to cut loose. They should have done it years ago. Same for Damian. So I'm happy that's over and that we can see Damian maybe get a ring that he does deserve.
More than anything, I'm well, not more than anything, because mostly I'm happy that he didn't end up in Miami. But I'm also just happy that we don't have to hear about it anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, the dude is arguably one of the greatest scorers in the history of the NBA. I don't, best case scenario, one of those guys is anywhere near what Dame was there. And I do agree to a certain extent, like, happy for him. But if this was 4 or 5 years ago, when the writing was sort of on the wall that team was pretty close to their ceiling, like the Dame and CJ teams, had he been like, look, I want out, people have been like, okay. But it was like the past 3 or 4 years, like the loyalty stuff, like, oh, I'm loyal. And that now all of a sudden it's like, well, now the team is changing directions. Oh, I'm not loyal anymore then. It's like
he would say I think he would say they're not loyal.
Well, the thing is though, like that was a reality at any point in time that the team could just go, hey, you know what, this isn't working, and we need to change what we're doing. And I think the writing has been on the wall for the past couple of seasons there, and their management just didn't do a great job with managing assets and building a team around them. But it's going to be exciting to watch the Bucks. It's going to be a terrifying team offensively for sure. We already weren't really looking forward to playing the Bucks, so nothing really changes for me in that regard. I'm not like, oh man, because the Magic aren't expected to be in contention this year or next year either. So for the Magic, everything is about the future. If you're looking around the league and you're like, oh man, the Warriors got Chris Paul and the Lakers still have LeBron and AD, and oh, now look at the Bucks and blah blah blah. Like, let them have their time. The Magic are on the come up. And not to make a Hamilton reference here.
Oh, boy.
But Hamilton, one of my favorite musicals, the great Leslie Odom Jr. He has a song in that play called "Wait for It." He says, "I'm not standing still. I'm lying in wait." The Magic are not standing still. They are lying in wait. They are ready for those guys on this roster to take a jump. Luke cannot believe that I'm tying this into Hamilton, by the way, but I did.
It turned out better than I thought it was going to be honest with you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But yeah, our time will come, folks. Just got to stay patient a little bit longer here. Okay, Luke, let's, I know we're going to really get into the nitty gritty with some of these teams, but let's break this up a little bit. Let's talk about like the top of the East. And I think when we're talking about the top of the East, we're mostly talking like seed like 1 through 5. Would we agree on that? Or would you say fine. 1 through 4?
Yeah, 1 through 5 is good.
Speaking
Perfect,
of 1
actually.
through 5, not to give the old little toot, but I had a funny
Toot it,
meme,
brother.
the Kevin James, little hands
That's
in the
such a
pocket,
funny-
meme that's going around. Put the little hat on him and said, "Hey, you really think the Magic can be the 5 seed in the East?" And, maybe we'll see. We'll talk about that in detail. But Luke, let's start top of the Eastern Conference, the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference this year. Who do you expect that to be?
I've got the Bucks. As of today, I don't think that comes as a shock. I've got the Bucks. Who do you have?
I would still say the Bucks, and I guess we don't have to rehash that whole conversation, but I don't feel like the Celtics are that far behind. Like, it's easy to see, like, oh wow, Dame and Giannis, like they're just gonna run away with it, but are they really? Like, the team is still old. The team is still not that deep. The Milwaukee Bucks. The Boston Celtics got better adding Kristaps Porzingis. It's going to take time for both of those teams to gel, I think. But like the Celtics, I think, are probably going to gel a bit quicker, holding on to a bit more continuity. So I do think the Celtics will be the 2nd seed. I don't think that the Bucks are going to run away with the Eastern Conference by any means.
Yeah. So you said your 2nd seed, right? So you said you've got the Celtics there at 2 with the addition of Kristaps. I think.
Ooh, spicy.
I think the Sixers are going to land Jrue Holliday. And I think Jrue Holiday unlocks a lot there with what they've needed to play alongside guys like Maxey and Joel Embiid.
But that we're talking about moving Harden out.
Yes. Harden's
right.
out. You're bringing Maxey in. I just think that Harden has got to just be a distraction at 24/7. Like, there's not a moment where Harden isn't a distraction, and that includes last year, where I'm sure he was a distraction at points in the season, whether it be his attitude or whatever, and they still finished 3rd. I don't think that I'm not set concretely on the Sixers being 2 if they get Jrue Holiday, but I think it definitely is more of a toss-up for me that the Celtics move into that 2 spot over the Sixers. But obviously, if the Sixers team is the same as last year, I've got the Celtics over them with that addition of Kristaps. But I genuinely think Jrue Holiday is so much more valuable than the casual NBA fan wants to give credit for. He can come in and elevate your team more than a current day James Harden can. It's just the play style for me, and Jrue Holiday can lock down on defense. I really do. I have a lot of stock in Jrue Holiday, that's for sure.
So I would hold off on that. Like, I think I would still have the Celtics at 2 over Philadelphia, even if Jrue is moved there. And that's still very much in the air. I know, that people have immediately, as soon as the trade was done, was like, well, Miami should just make the same exact offer for Jrue Holiday because, like, the window is closing and you need to pounce now. Which, by the way, I hate to keep bringing this back to Miami, but I had so many, I'm doing air quotes if you're not watching on YouTube, quote unquote Magic fans that were like, oh, well, why are you laughing at the Heat? They have way more championships than us and blah, 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 blah. The Magic don't do anything. First of all, go get your LeBron James jersey out of your closet. I know it's in there. Stop hiding. And nobody cares. Okay, I'm allowed to hate on the Heat as much as I want. I don't need a rational reason for it. It doesn't exist. I'm admitting that to you all. So just get over it. But if he is traded to Philadelphia, talking about Jrue, that does change things a bit. And I would definitely probably close the gap of what I think, will be between the Celtics and the 76ers. And that would probably make it pretty close for the 2nd seed. But right now, I have the 76ers finishing 3rd in the Eastern Conference. 4, I really think we're going to have the same team here. Who do you have?
I have the Cavs.
Okay, me too.
Perfect.
Donovan Mitchell doesn't necessarily want to sign the extension right now. They can kind of cross that bridge when they get there. But another year of Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen, a year older, a year wiser. Evan Mobley, year 3, probably going to take a leap there. You still got Darius Garland, added Max Strus to that roster as well. Their offense and defense, he's going to pick it up for them on really both ends. Stupid Heat let him go. Oh my goodness. But I've got the Cavs at 4. And then again, I think we're going to probably have the same team at 5. And then we can really start to open up this conversation here But who do you have at finishing 5th in the Eastern Conference?
I have the New York Knickerbockers.
Makes sense. I mean, in ways of, or in terms of moves that they've made, bringing in Dante DiVincenzo, still going to have, Josh Hart, believe they re-signed him. I don't know if they re-signed him or if it was an extension, but I know there was the transaction there. Jalen Brunson, obviously still, Julius Randle. This team is going to go as far as Isaiah Brunson can carry them. They should really lean into that this season. But I do like the addition of Dante DiVincenzo as well. Obi Toppin on his way out. Our boy Evan Fournier is still there, or my boy Evan Fournier, depending on how you want to look at that. But people still think there's an opportunity for the Knicks to make a move and Evan Fournier to be included in that. So yeah, I think we're pretty much on the same page here in terms of like the top of the Eastern Conference, and I think most people would be on board with that being like the top 5. So before we go ahead and move on to really talking about the back half of the Eastern Conference playoff picture, we'll talk a little bit about who we think will be sort of in that bottom tier of the East. But before we do that, we have to give a very special shout out to our wonderful patrons, the folks that help make each and every one of our episodes and really all of our content possible. You can find us at patreon.com/The Six Man Show if you'd like to join our Patreon. We do have a very special patron for this episode. Kaysen Green joined at our Hall of Fame tier level, and Kaysen took advantage of our deal where you get a pretty hefty discount for just paying for the entire year. So Kaysen went ahead and did that. Paid for the entire year at our Hall of Fame tier level. So really appreciate that, Grace. Kaysen, the Kaysen Green, I'm thinking Grayson Allen. Kind of threw me off there, but Kaysen, again, really, really appreciate you joining the family here. And you all can join our Patreon for as little as $2 a month, plus some other tiers. Our elite tier, and those benefits are getting ready to ramp up again. If you're not familiar already, in our elite tier, you get up to 35% off home games for the Orlando Magic during the regular season. So be on the lookout for that. If you like the show and you're thinking of being a patron already and you want to go to a lot of Magic games this year, the elite tier is a great way to help support us, and then you also save money on Magic games, so it works out for everybody. Again, you can find us at patreon.com/The Six Man Show, and another benefit of our Patreon is we shout out our Hall of Fame and elite tier patrons every single episode. We'll start with Court Cousins, Drew Gooden, Armin, Carson Tulo, Jonathan Borges, Normal, Magic Player History, Gabe Gaines, Wiffle, Michael Martin, Jamel Miller, Michael Salapong, Donkey Punch Dave, Paolo and Francis Warren, Pierre A, Nostalgia and M&M's, Dylan Holden, Mr. Mikey, Eduardo Sanchez, Drum, Drummy, Drum, Danimal, Dutto 15, Bobby Skinner, PB in the Mix, Goody 93, Teddy Sylvia, Eric Lopez, Fuchsia, Juan Giraldo, Bill Fulton, Edmund Lagone, Jose Esquilin, Destined for Greatness, Caleb Pete, Cannibalism, Time, Mr. TV, ESPN Really Sucks, Gear 95, Shred, Junior Bruce, Half Reekin, Shahin 177, Bobby the Dawn, Himlo Ben Himro, RM Prov 221, Ray Pastrana, Magic Kid 714, Spanking Season, Soft Taco, Fuego Nando, Victor Cologne, Irish Magic Mike, Austin Lampy, Random Hustle, Only Franz, Maria, Keith Wallace, Fritz, Currency Kept, Bruv Sal, and our boy, the new patron, Kaysen Green. A big thanks to all of our patrons. Again, find us at patreon.com/The Six Man Show. All right, let's talk about the lower portion of the Eastern Conference playoff picture, about where we figure, the Magic should be able to finish here, Luke. Let's just go right to it. Let's talk about the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference. Who do you expect to end the year there?
So first, I want to kind of lay out that I sent it earlier to y'all in our chat. But basically, I went through like the man games lost, which is essentially the combined amount of games that your players miss in the entirety of the season, right? So just to kind of recap quickly here, the top 2 teams with the most games lost, over 250 games lost, as far as injury and players being out, was Miami and Orlando. Okay, Miami and Orlando were there. And then the Pacers were basically the rest of these teams that were within the Magic, like within 7 games of the Magic, experienced pretty good injury luck last year. The Pacers, the Bulls, the Raptors, the Wizards, the Hawks had the best injury luck of the teams that were within the Magic's, space there, so for me, this is all going to play a huge part in it. How many injuries did these teams have? That sort of thing. Now, getting to who I have at 6, I have the Orlando Magic at 6. I had to do it. We obviously are homers unashamedly, but I think when you look at the Heat, I've got them at 7. Okay, so that's the last thing I'll reveal here, but I've got them at 7. They lose, like we said, 2 key pieces to that team in Strus and Gabe Vincent. And this really, for me, kind of counteracts the injury luck as well. Like how they had really bad injury luck, they probably will have better because you couldn't have worse than what the Miami Heat had last year with injury luck. I think that the Heat, with those losses and with the injury luck, even with that, I think this team finds himself at 7 at the end of the year.
Yeah, so I would really have to agree. Like when we're talking about the Magic, hard for them to have worse injury luck than they had last year. I'm trying to knock on, whatever wood is around me. We're now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days away from media day. And unless we have an injury like we did last year to Markelle Fultz, who, they announced that he broke his toe like literally the day before or the morning of media day. I don't remember what it was last year now. But barring anything crazy like that happening, the Magic should not be getting off to a 5-20 start like they did last year, mostly due to the fact that they didn't have a healthy point guard on the roster. If we can combine that with guys like Markelle and Wendell and Jalen Suggs and Cole Anthony being relatively healthy, like I'm talking about, playing close to 70 games, and then the X factor, Jonathan Isaac. If Jonathan Isaac can stay healthy for the entire year, I'm not talking about not missing any games. There's no chance that Jonathan Isaac plays like 70 games. Like if that were to happen, it would be an actual miracle because of the fact that they're most likely going to continue him. Like he's going to pick up where he left off last March. That's what I would expect. I would be really surprised if he comes right out of the gate without any kind of minutes restriction. Because he didn't come off of a minutes restriction last year, I don't expect that we're going to see him playing like back-to-backs or 3 games in 4 nights or 5 games in 7 nights. I don't think we're going to see that. Like they're going to be, and they should be, very cautious with the way that they ramp him up. Now, once we get into the end of the season and we have our eyes on playoff seeding and everything like that, and we're getting into the playoffs, you hope by that point you can throw a lot of that stuff out the window. But I started to see a little bit of the Jonathan Isaac hype circling the Magic Twitter sphere the last couple of days. And yes, with the usual, detractors like, hey, like let's just wait and see if this kid can get healthy. And to that point, I absolutely agree. But someone made a tweet, and I'm very sorry that I don't remember exactly who it was, because I'm about to quote your tweet, and I don't remember who it was. But they basically said, like, getting a healthy Jonathan Isaac for the bulk of the season is like a major free agent acquisition for this roster. We saw in the 11 games that he played last year, although he was a little bit rusty, the defense, like the speed, the anticipation is all still there. So when we talk about like 2019, 2020 Jonathan Isaac and the fact that he was, top 2 or 3 in Defensive Player of the Year at that point, when people try to say, oh, well, we don't know what would have happened the rest of the season, go back and use your freaking eyes, okay? The eye test tells you he was one of the best, most dominant and special defenders in the entire league during that point. I don't care what anybody says. You extrapolate that over a 82-game season, and the kid would have been first team all defense and would have been a Defensive Player of the Year finalist at the absolute worst. If he can be 90% of that, it's still the best defender on this team by a mile, and that's counting Jalen Suggs being on the roster. Jalen has shown to be a really like lockdown guy, but just in terms of like overall defensive impact, J.I. was like a game changer.
We talked about this before many, 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 many times. We all are aware of the 5-20 start for the Magic last year. Played a huge part in the injury luck or lack thereof. You finished the season 29-28, over 500, and that's with the last 3 games of the year being very tanky. So even if you give yourself 2 wins out of those last 3 games, you really could have finished the season 31-26, which sounds a lot better than 29-28. So I don't think it is outlandish to say that the Magic can finish over all of these teams and finish 6th. Will I be surprised if the Miami Heat are able to finish 6th in the East? Absolutely not. Would I be surprised if the Bulls catch fire at some point in the season? It only takes one big stretch and they find them catapult themselves up the standings and kind of hold their head above water for the rest of the year to finish at 6. I would not. But I'm going out on a limb in a very homer take of mine, and I'm aware. But I do think that we have facts to back this up, as you just stated, and as I just talked about the record to end the season, what this team can really do. I've got the Magic at 6th.
And I do think, and I'm not wishing this upon anybody, but this is just the reality of the NBA. The Magic are like a catastrophic New York Knicks injury away from being able to get as high as 5. You don't make the kind of leap that the Magic would need to make from missing the play-in last year to getting to 5 without injury luck in front of you, in the standings. Or if just literally everything goes right. We've talked about the scenarios. Wendell Carter plays 70-plus games. Markelle Fultz plays 70-plus games. Jalen Suggs plays 70-plus games. Cole Anthony plays 70-plus games. Jonathan Isaac plays 60-plus games. We get huge jumps from Franz Wagner, and maybe not huge jumps, but significant jumps from Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero. You get all of that, and you get some solid bench play. That's what we're talking about, best case scenario, and that's where we're talking about the Magic getting over 45 plus wins. That's best case scenario. And the Knicks last year were the 5 seed with 47 wins. So when we talk about that's incredibly unlikely, but that's the best possible case scenario if that were to happen.
I think last year robbed us of a lot of perspective with this team, with the injuries. And again, that is obviously that was the biggest part of last season was the injuries, right? And then when you get guys back, you are building continuity. You have to start building it in game 26. You start being able to build that continuity when you get guys back in the game and you're learning each other. The Magic, with the pace to finish the season, we've said this before, but it was right between 44 and 45 wins is the pace if you were to extrapolate that across an 82-game season. Do we not think that this team is better than last year? And obviously it's a little bigger sample size, but I mean, it is just not outlandish for me to think this team can't win 45, 46 games. That's not my prediction, but it's not outlandish.
Right. Yeah. The thing about what you were talking about earlier is sure, if the Magic don't completely tank away the last couple of games of the season last year, did they finish with 36 wins? Right. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? If they don't start 5-20, even if they start 10-15, then all of a sudden we're talking about a team that was going to be pretty close to 40 wins, not tanking away the last few games of the season and just picking up a handful of more wins during that horrendous stretch. The Magic legitimately could have been a team close to 40 wins. So now when we are looking at that perspective, if we do get a lot of these best case scenarios, I don't think 40, 44, 40, 43, 44, 45 wins, I don't think that is totally out of the question. And when we look at the schedule this upcoming season, I know we broke it down, a couple of months ago or about a month and a half ago when the schedule came out. If you want to hear the entire breakdown of that, you can go back in the podcast archives, or you can look back on our YouTube channel when we really went through the entire schedule. But it's tough to start out. The first couple of months of the season are going to be tough. And if the Magic can hover around 500 and make it through, the month of January. And like, if you're around 500 going into the All-Star break, that's going to be a massive deal for this team. Just given, like, start the season again at home October 25th versus the Houston Rockets. Then right after that, you're gone basically for a week-long road trip at Portland, which should now, probably be a win now that Dame is being traded and Jrue Holliday, it seems like, is going to be traded as well. Then you're at the Lakers, at the Clippers, at Utah, and then you come back home for Los Angeles. You're home for a few games, and then you're on the road, 4-game road trip. You're playing at Brooklyn, at Chicago, 2 of those at Brooklyn, and then at Chicago on Friday, November 17th, being in-season tournament games. You have one more game on the road versus Indiana, and then you come home November 21st at home versus the Raptors. That's going to be an in-season tournament game. Well, you follow that up, you got a back-to-back against the Denver Nuggets, and then Friday, November 24th, you're at home Black Friday against the Boston Celtics for your final in-season tournament game. And then the last, week of November and, the first few weeks of December, it's pretty tough. But then we get to this stretch, December 29th through January 29th. Luke, I'm just going to go through this one more time because it really is just a crazy, crazy, brutal stretch. I mean, even if we go back a little bit further, like starting Monday, December 11th, so basically a month and a half here, there's one game where you get a break, really, and it's against Washington. But you're home for Cleveland, at Boston, home for Miami, at Milwaukee, at Indiana, at Washington, home for Philadelphia, home for the Knicks, at the Suns, at the Warriors, at the Kings, at the Nuggets, at home for the Hawks, at home for the Minnesota Timberwolves, at Miami, at OKC, at New York, at Atlanta, home for Philadelphia, home for Miami, home for Cleveland, at Memphis, home for Phoenix, and then at Dallas. You've got, like, what is that, a 5-6 game streak or 5-6 week streak where you're playing a playoff team almost every night except for like Indiana and Washington. Like, it doesn't get any tougher than that. If the Magic can get through that stretch and they get to the All-Star break within, 4 or 5 games of 500, that's going to be a massive deal, and that sets you up to be really successful the last couple months of the season heading into the playoffs.
There's some key games there that are at home. I know you mentioned the Hawks. You mentioned the Knicks at home. The Magic had success at home last year. Despite the terrible record to start the year, you finished the year 20-21 at home. You get to start off on the right foot at the beginning of the season, right? The home opener, as we all know. And you also get to rectify your performance on the road last year. 14-27 compared to 20-21. Home court advantage was real for the Magic last year. And I just think that they've got to really assert dominance when you go and play at Portland and at both LAs to start the season. You have a chance to be 1-0 to start the year. That's a big confidence boost. It's a young group. They need all the confidence they can get. I think they are already very confident. We know that. But it's a different thing to see the results and in the production. So you win that home opener, you're going to Portland without Dame, like you said, without likely Jrue Holliday. Like, you could really be, is that the second road game or the second game of the year, Jonathan?
At
that Portland game? Yeah. So you could realistically start the season 2-0, which does a lot for the confidence and for just gelling and continuity and being in a groove. You get to go to the LAs, and we know guys like Markelle Fultz loves to play in LA. And these other guys are going to get up for it. Paolo's going to get up for that, obviously. Franz is always getting up for it because he's Mr. Consistent Iron Man. Like, this season could start incredibly. And like you said, these first couple months, this is the foundation that you're building for the future. And you just have to get on a tear to start this season, or else you look at that December 11th through January stretch, it could all go down the drain. You have to capitalize and build those wins early in the season so that when you get to the point where it is super hard, you've already established your dominance on the road. You've established your comfortability at home, picking up where you left off last year near the end of the year at home. There's a lot of really good things that this team has the opportunity to do, and I hope they capitalize on every single opportunity. Being young and hungry, this team is going to make a lot of noise this year. You can see it even by Vegas. Vegas doesn't even believe in them, which is saying something. Vegas is usually on top of it, but for the past couple of years, Vegas has not been on top of it when it comes to the Magic and how they don't have a pulse on them, which is crazy to me. Because if you just sit down and analyze this team and last season and what went wrong, what went right, it is just very much not outlandish to say they could win this division. I think they've got more going than the Hawks do. The Hawks, who lose John Collins, that's a huge piece that they thought was going to be the future, and now he's not there anymore. And you're really putting the whole load on Trae Young and DeJounte. I just don't know that they can even do it. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, nobody really has a pulse on this team, and I'm very interested to see 10, 15 games into the season, has the tune changed about the Orlando Magic? We'll see. You know that there's always those people that are, you're seeing screenshots at the beginning of the season. Ooh, look at these teams in the top. Most of the time it ends up meaning nothing, right? You got guys like the Jazz, teams like the Jazz, but they still put the league on notice. Jazz started out hot, ended not so much, right? We saw it with the Cavs a couple years ago. They started out super hot, and then they came down. The Kings, they start hot, they stay hot, right? They go on and they beat the Warriors. Like, that was incredible. So these things always happen, and you always can get a gauge on it at the beginning of the season. What are the weaknesses, but what are the strengths? This team is going to put on a show.
Yeah, I don't want this to sound like a cop-out, but once we get past 6, maybe it's our bias that's like, yeah, we're just going to put the Magic, at 6 above, Brooklyn, Atlanta, Miami, Chicago, Toronto, Indiana. But like beyond that, because I really do believe that the Magic should, on paper, all things considered, again, they don't even have to go completely right for the Magic. If they just go mostly right for the Magic, they should meet these expectations that we're talking about. Like Brooklyn was the 6th seed last year with 45 wins. Beneath them, Miami, they ended up in the play-in game, so they ended up 8. But like, you're telling me the Magic can't be the 6th seed this year with, 45, 44, 43 wins? Absolutely possible. But when we get past the Magic, I think there's a good case for a lot of these teams. Like, all of these teams, I think, have a case to end up 6 through 10, 11 in the Eastern Conference. When you look at the Miami Heat, obviously they still have Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, he's healthy. Nikola Jovic, by all accounts, he's supposed to take a leap this year. The Chicago Bulls still have DeMar, Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic. I think there's the potential there because we've already heard sort of the rhetoric from Vooch that, they kind of realize that if they don't accomplish good things this year, it could really be their last hurrah as a group. And if the Chicago Bulls get off to a rough start, they might just pull the trigger and blow it up, or, just get discouraged and really underperform in this coming year. Atlanta is the one that's interesting to me. Like you mentioned, moving off of John Collins, but they've got some, younger guys, like Sadiq Bey, Onyeka Okongwu, still Trae Young. I think he's become a little bit underrated at this point. DeJounte Murray, and then they have guys like Bogdanovich, DeAndre Hunter, AJ Griffin, guys that are going to be asked to have bigger roles and sort of step into those. And I'm excited to see sort of how those guys respond. Like, AJ Griffin had a great year last year. DeAndre Hunter, it seems like he's always sort of wanted a bigger role. Now that John Collins isn't there, and he was basically like the third option for them offensively, that's going to open up some other opportunities for other guys just sort of up and down their roster. Another guy, Kobe Buffkin, a lot of, that people, a guy that a lot of people liked, coming out of Michigan this year. So I think Atlanta's got a case. Toronto's got a case. Like Pascal Siakam, adding Grady Dick, still have Jakob Poeltl, adding Dennis Schroeder, Scotty Barnes. Is he able to sort of regain his Rookie of the Year form and get back on the trajectory that a lot of people had expected from him? Still have OG and Gary Trent Jr. Still a lot of talent on that roster. Just sort of now that guys like Fred VanVleet have moved on? What's the hierarchy going to look like, and can they figure out a way to make things work a little bit better? And then Indiana, adding Bruce Brown. We expect Buddy Hield to be moved before the start of the season. So what does that look like? Year 2 of a guy like Andrew Nembhard, who had a really good rookie season. Aaron Nesmith is a guy that some people expect to take a big step forward. Another year out of Benedict Mathurin and Tyrese Halliburton. Now they've added Obi Toppin. Like, there are so many interesting teams that you could, like, we run the draft lottery, like the tankathon, like the simulator every year. Hopefully not this year. And it's like you just see a different mix of teams every time. If you take 6 through 11 in the Eastern Conference and you just start rolling out different combinations, I do think like you could tell me any outcome happens with those 6 teams there, and I could talk myself into it probably. If the Magic finish 11th and they're outside of the play-in, that just tells me that we weren't healthy. But outside of that, the Magic should find themselves like squarely in the playoff picture, not like scratching and clawing the last few games to make the play-in.
I think when you look at it, I mean, just to give you an idea as well, like my kind of prediction, can I just really quickly round out the rest of my
standings?
Please do,
here, because I really cannot decide on the rest of the standings here.
So, I mean, even as we're talking, I'm mixing and matching and whatever, because like you said, it is very much a toss-up. I've got the Magic at 6, the Heat at 7, 8, the Bulls, 9, Pacers, adding Toppin, Bruce Brown, Jarris Walker, those guys you named earlier. 10, I've got the Hawks. I've got them toppling down a little bit just because of their injury luck. They had such incredible injury luck last year. There's just no way that it's the same again. I'm going Hawks at 10. Raptors at 11. No Fred VanVleet. Obviously, you add a guy like Grady Dick to the mix there in Toronto. The Wizards, 12. They add Poole. They also had great injury luck last year. Like, really great. So I'm putting them at 12. The Nets.
Got the Nets below the Wizards. That's interesting.
The Bridges, even with Bridges, after the trade and everything, they were under 500. Under 500 with Bridges. Small sample size, 12 and 15 with Bridges. But I just don't know that they're going to be able to put it together. 14
I do
Pistons.
think, and not to interrupt you, but I didn't mention the Nets. I do think once teams get some more tape on Bridges, we saw some pretty big scoring outbursts like right after the trade. Once teams get more film on him being the number one option and they'll know what to take away, I don't think we're going to see Bridges be anywhere near the numbers that he had like post-trade deadline last year.
Listen, man, the Nets were weird last year. You had Cam Thomas just dropping 40 bombs consecutive games because there was no one else to turn to, but nobody could stop him. Like, he still was great in those games offensively. But I don't know. But yeah, with the Nets, I would not be shocked if people figure them out. They finished this 13th, right? They dropped. They were very fortunate to not be in the play-in last year. I think if they go play-in, there's a great chance that they're either the 8th seed or they're out of the postseason. And they don't get to see the playoffs at all. So I've got the Nets 3rd, Pistons 14th. The Hornets are just a train wreck. I've got them 15th. As much as I think that LaMelo Ball is a lot of fun, that team's just too immature. Can you imagine having to deal with like Magic players doing stuff like they're dealing with right now? Yeah, Kai Jones.
You think Steve Clifford regrets stepping down as Magic head coach?
Yeah, because he didn't want to be part of a rebuild. And now I've projected
now he's like
part
of one of the worst rebuilds in NBA history with what they've got going on there the last several months.
Yeah, I've got you 9 spots lower than the team that you left because you don't want to be part of a rebuild. Yeah. Probably not a great look there, Stevie, but love you. Love what you did for us. Love the fact that you took us to the playoffs. That's for sure. Forever indebted because it might have been pretty dark that year without you, but yeah,
if he could go back and be like, you know what, I'll just deal with 2 crappy years, and then to be where the Magic are now, I think he probably like rethinks that.
I don't know if the chemistry. Sure. I don't know. If
definitely not
close to the same.
No,
I don't know.
I would agree with that.
Have the success that they've had even in the short.
No,
time
I'm not saying it would have worked out for us any better at all. I'm just like, if I'm him, and I'm like, you know what? If I just would have stuck it out a couple of years, like look at what they did with this roster.
Yeah, I just don't think it would have taken them a couple of years though. I think it would have taken more. I think it wouldn't have been that cut and dried.
Maybe if you just sit back and let the front office do what they planned on doing. They still draft Franz, still draft Jalen, still draft Paolo. Probably you're still in much better shape than they are in Charlotte right now with the
no doubt about it.
Miles Bridges and Kai Jones and LaMelo with his injury history, and now I've been seeing stuff like this dude loves to run red lights, like just comes out of Hornets games flying in his sports car running red lights. Like at some point that's not going to end up well. I think in the next 12 months would not be surprised at all to see a LaMelo Ball trade request out of Charlotte.
I also think it's just crazy. Like they
took Brandon Miller over Scoot Henderson. What are we doing?
That's what I was also gonna say. And listen, maybe the Brandon Miller stuff, maybe he is completely clean of anything, right? But it is still hilarious to look at and be like, this team's a train wreck. Oh, by the way, they take Brandon Miller, who was involved in like a whole gun thing in college. Like the decisions just haven't been awesome. Just to not even mention that Brandon Miller wasn't the better talent, I don't think. There's a whole lot of time to tell. But I don't know how that's going to pan out in Charlotte. I think that they got to do a lot of mixing and matching in the front office, players from top to bottom. They got to start over.
I think the super interesting thing about the East, and this is I think one of the last things that we'll talk about in regards to this, is like I think outside of Washington, like who is going to be tanking this season? Like, as you get later into the season, maybe priorities change for a team like Charlotte or maybe for Detroit. But like to start the season, I really think everybody's going to be going for it.
Yeah, there's no Wemby. No Wemby.
I don't even know that it's necessarily that. I feel like a lot of these teams are just in positions where for some teams it's like, hey, it's put up or shut up time. Like we need to win or we're going to break up this team. Or it's teams, like the Pacers and like the Magic and like the Hawks who have sort of been like waiting to, like the Hawks, they have the great run a couple of years ago, but obviously the roster is a bit different than it was then. Like they're like, okay, we need to take another step up. If we're looking at this core with Trey and with DeJounte, like they should be an improved team this year if they're on the trajectory that they want to be on. Charlotte, you got to do something if you're going to keep LaMelo, if he's not going to make a trade request in the next year or so. And then Detroit, they're probably tired of losing too, I would assume. But 17 wins last year, but you didn't have Cade for most of the year, so they probably would have been a bit better without him. They're probably still looking at another lottery pick next year. But for the most part, I think everybody in the East is really going to be going for it.
They got to, like you said, they've got to go for it. And you just look at like in terms of which teams, if it goes bad, could it go really, really bad to where they blow it up? Easily the Bulls, the Hawks, the Raptors, who are kind of already there now. They don't have Fred VanVleet.
Yeah, with like the OG, Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr. kind of stuff. Yeah.
The Wizards, they add Poole and like what I don't know
still
what
have
their
Kuzma.
direction. Yeah, so that they can move pieces if need be. The Nets, if things just go super south with them, like if they do end 13th in the East, are they looking to either add to Bridges or are they looking to move Bridges to try to get somebody better, but or just like more assets? And then the Hornets,
Bridges' contract is still so good though. Like 21 this year, 23 next year, 25 the following year. Like, is he going to average, the 26 points per game that he was with the Nets when he came over? I really don't see that. But is he going to score, 21, 22 points a game maybe? Probably. But if Mikal Bridges is your number one option, you're not a playoff team.
Right.
Luke, the last thing that I want to talk about, and I guess maybe we could have covered this towards the top, but right before we started recording, Kevin O'Connor, a guy that we're fans of over at The Ringer, he tweeted out that the Magic should make the trade for Jrue Holliday. And I'll read the whole tweet out here. Pull this back up here. The Magic should go after Jrue Holliday, upgrade at point guard, fits the multiple ball handler offense, a needed veteran. Plenty of ways to assemble a deal that makes sense for the Blazers too. So the Blazers at this point are really going to be looking for big contracts that they can move off of and open up cap space, young players, and picks. I'm not saying, no, I am saying that I would do this if the opportunity, arises. So Jrue Holliday is, I believe, 34 years old now and makes pretty close to $40 million this year and next year. And then he's a free agent. So we're talking about a guy that you would have for 2 years. Looking at Fanspo on the trade machine, a deal that I think makes sense for both teams if they were really looking to make this deal, which I don't think the Magic necessarily are. Would I be shocked if they pull the trigger on this? No. But I do think the Magic are still pretty content just evaluating this final year before going in on a big deal like this. But the trade would be for Jrue Holliday.
Did this?
I wouldn't be shocked if the Magic did this because I do think it makes sense. It would be Jrue Holliday for Jonathan Isaac, Gary Harris, and Cole Anthony. Jonathan Isaac, the $17.4 million, if the Magic just don't believe he's going to be healthy, the Blazers take that on for this year, and then he's non-guaranteed next year. So they get off of the $17.6 or $17.4 million. Gary Harris is an expiring contract this year. And then Cole Anthony. You trade Cole Anthony and Gary Harris, you bring in Jrue Holliday. That opens up more minutes for Anthony Black, a guy that the Magic just invested a high draft pick in. Cole Anthony, although they do have a lot of young guards over there, so maybe that part doesn't make a ton of sense for Portland. But if they want to take Cole and maybe flip him to another team, I don't know. But that team could then I think the start of the season is the deadline. We talked about this on the last episode, the deadline for him to sign an extension. So maybe they can get something done before the end of the year. But if it's not, Cole Anthony, like Cole Anthony is a guy who at that price point I thought would, give value to them. Like you could include a guy like Chuma Okeke in that deal. Or maybe it's like Goga and Caleb Houston get included in that deal. I don't know. At that point, you're just trying to make the money up. But if they're going to bring Jrue Holliday in, start him next to, Markelle Fultz. We talked about Jalen being in that role, like being a lockdown defender. I don't hate a starting lineup of Markelle Fultz, Jrue Holliday, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr. It's a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. But it's just for 2 years. Unless you were really planning on making the big splash this summer in free agency, and you're like, no, we want to keep the money that we have for this offseason specifically, then you hold off on it. But if you weren't totally sold on making a big move this coming offseason, like you're looking at the free agent market, and you're like, oh, we don't really love that, and you're good with keeping Jrue Holliday for another year, or if they just say, we're just going to wait for the next guy to become available, Jrue Holliday isn't the guy for us, like, I don't think there's an outcome in those discussions that if the Magic's front office makes a decision that I wouldn't go, okay, I get that. Not doing it makes sense. Doing it kind of makes sense. How do you feel?
So your package was which three players?
It would be J.I., Gary Harris, and Cole Anthony. And I'm not saying that I make that deal, but if there is a deal to be made, I think it looks something like that.
So the deal that I did on my end was Jonathan Isaac, Chuma Okeke, you're not going to like this one, and Markelle Fultz. It's a straight one-to-one point guard. Like that's really what you're doing. J.I., who hasn't been healthy, Chuma, who's been basically played out of rotation. It's essentially at that point Jrue Holliday, Markelle Fultz. And it makes money works. And Jrue Holliday is if you look at in terms of last year, 7.4 assists per game. Magic haven't had a guy like that in a long time. we talk about all the time. The Magic can't even get a guy to average over 6 a game. Jrue Holliday comes in, fills the need. You still get to see what Jalen Suggs has when it comes to the 2 spot. I don't hate Gary Harris going in that deal at all. But in terms of making the money work, it works in your situation as well. But Markelle Fultz, it's a 1-to-1.
Yeah, Markelle doesn't make a ton of sense for the Trailblazers. I mean, I guess they wouldn't just let an asset like that walk. That just would be poor asset management. A guy that's extension eligible, that's proven that he can be a starting point guard in the league. Maybe they just turn around and try to flip him. But that was sort of the same thinking with Cole, just because of the sheer amount of guards that they have there now with Scoot and Anthony Simons, and I know there's another guy there that I'm forgetting right now. Shaedon Sharpe. Thank you very much. So yeah, either of the guards don't make a ton of sense for them, but if they're just they just flipped Dame for Jrue, and now they're going to flip Jrue for somebody else, and then they could, why stop there? You could bring somebody else in and just sort of keep flipping until you have a return, that you're happy with. That one would, I mean, all of these, the J.I. Gary Harris, Cole Anthony trade, that would hurt like hell. To me, yeah. If we enter the season with the roster that we have now, that means they're just looking to develop and evaluate one more year, and then they start to make big moves. If they make the big move now, they are just all in on Franz and Paolo making big leaps this year and really being able to make noise in the East and starting to attract eyes from players around the league. That's sort of where I'm at. We're 2 different paths now, and whichever path we walk down, and depending on what the roster looks like, October 25th is going to tell us everything we need to know. Even if we've always asked the front office to come out and just say things, but that would be one of those things we don't have to really guess what they're thinking now.
Yeah, I just think that as far as the Markelle thing, going back to that real quick, Dame was their point guard, right? You had Anthony Simons in his 62 starts. He's playing, off ball there, 4 assists per game.
Scoot's going to start.
7. And then, yeah, so Scoot obviously slides in there, but I just think that if you're, like you said, if you're just trying to unload and just see what you can get, play that merry-go-round, or if you just have Markelle being the backup point guard solely on that team, I think that's because long term I would love for Markelle Fultz to be a championship point guard on this team. There would be nothing that I would enjoy more, a guy that story comes full circle. But at the end of the day, he could also be a backup point guard on a really good team when it's all said and done. So I don't know. I would love to think that I definitely have not given up on Markelle Fultz. I think he's going to be great for the Magic this year. But it's interesting to think about. The Blazers could use him in that role just behind Scoot. I don't know.
I think his impact on winning, take the counting stats away, just his impact on winning.
Of course,
we've talked about it a million times with a ton of different guests. It's so apparent. Markelle Fultz is a starter in the NBA. There's not a question in my mind. It would be crazy for me to see him get traded to another team to be a backup, especially behind a young guard. That would be really crazy. Ultimately, I think the Magic stand pat and don't do anything. Go into the season with the roster that they have. Do what they've been talking about since the end of last season. Sure, we need to improve, but we're still evaluating. And this is going to be the last year of evaluating. And then it happens every summer. Last summer, it was Donovan Mitchell. This summer, it was Damian Lillard. Every other week, it's Kyrie Irving. Somebody gets disgruntled, becomes available. It will happen. It's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. And the Magic, is Jrue Holliday the one that they want to cash their chips in? I don't know. There could be way worse moves, that the Magic could make other than some of these deals that we've talked about. And Luke, you said something funny to me before we started to record as we were talking a little bit about Jrue Holiday. You're like, oh, well, they probably want to move him to a contender. if I'm Portland and I just dealt with the saga that was Damian Lillard and demanding where he wanted to go, and everyone in the world was telling me that I should accept a crappy offer just to move a guy where he wanted to go, and now I've got Jrue Holliday, the dude is making $40 million, like essentially the next couple of years, each year over the course of the next couple of years. I'm moving that dude for the best, offer that I get at this point. Dude has a title. I know, these guys get to the end of their career, they still want to compete. But sometimes, bro, you just got to realize you're making 40 M's, and you might just be able to go to a middling playoff team and make a lot of money and play for a decent team, maybe not a contender, but we'll see. Portland doesn't know Jrue Holliday anything.
I hear you, but I bet he gets his way. He has too good of a reputation around the league, in my opinion, to just be sent to somewhere to waste away for the rest of his career. Like,
I'm not saying send him to Washington or Detroit. Like, what was it? Tyrese Halliburton on his stream, was joking about Buddy Hield, calling him like, I can't believe they sent me to Orlando. Like, guess what, bro? Orlando is one of the best up-and-coming destinations in the league right now. You could do much worse. If Jrue Holliday gets sent to Orlando, I'm not going to feel bad for him at all. It's a good situation to be in right now. But you might end up being right. He might say, hey, this is where I want to go, and that might be where he ends up. But if I'm the GM of the Trailblazers, I'm like, bro, I'm tired of these guys telling me where they want to go. I'm just trying to make a deal. You know what I mean? Like, brother, we just dealt with this for 3 months. We don't want to do this again, okay? Mm-hmm. But we'll see what happens there. Yeah, Luke, this is our last episode until Media Day, man. I'm excited. Now that I got the chance to experience Media Day last year, I know you've been there for a Media Day before. I really didn't know what to expect. I'm excited to see like how much better our coverage is for this Media Day now that I'm not just going to be like the shaking, nervous kid, like, sitting there that doesn't have any idea what's going on.
Yeah, no, it'll be a lot of fun. Be good to see everybody again too, and get the season going.
Let's do it. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. We'll wrap it up here. For Luke Sylvia, this has been Jonathan Osborne. You all have been listening to the Sixth Man Show, and we will catch you guys next time. See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Sixth Man Show. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Spotify to get new episodes downloaded directly to your phone. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to give us a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a lot. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Sixth Man Show. We'll catch you guys next time. Go Magic!